Hello my friends and welcome back to the rabbit hole. In today's video I am going to be answering the question of the difference between drugstore and high-end, but not in the way that you've probably seen quite a few videos, including my own approach, which is, the half face in drugstore, half face in high-end. Can you tell the difference? Today we're going to be actually talking about the real differences. Why are these products priced differently? What's different in the ingredients? As a bonus, I am wearing both drugstore and high-end products on my face, and I'm not going to list them just yet. I want you to guess. Can you? I do feel like I've kind of peppered the answer to this question in a lot of different videos, but not quite in an ingredients perspective entirely. So some of this may be review, but let's go over some basic factors that make a difference between drugstore and high-end. I'm going to be talking about these palettes even more throughout the video, but let's start with some basic comparisons. Here we have an Urban Decay Naked 3 palette, which retails for $54, and then the Maybelline Blush Nudes palette, which retails for $10.99. Now, I said in a video a long time ago, remember that the actual cost of these items is pretty consistently between 10 to 20% of the retail cost, meaning this would cost about $5 to $10. I feel like I've seen a lot of people get kind of hung up on that fact, especially if you're not getting the full picture with it. So yes, that's the cost, that's the materials, that's the products inside, but that's not the full picture. So a lot of times people will say, when they first find out this information, they'll say, okay, well, so it costs $10 to make that and you want me to pay $54, you're ripping me off, I should pay $10. Well, not quite, because if you paid $10 for this, Urban Decay would be out of business. So let's talk about those other factors before we talk about the makeup product inside. Obviously, the packaging. This packaging costs clearly a lot more. You can feel the weight of it in your hand. It does have a mirror inside. Mirrors are always more expensive. Comes with a brush, and it's actually a nice brush. The quality of the packaging is a big part of the price, whereas with this one, it's just a flimsy, generic palette, but that's okay, right? Because the makeup inside is what matters for some people, and that's actually a big part of the difference. Now, advertising is a giant portion of the actual cost for the company before they profit. And that's not something you're going to see actually in these, but you're going to be paying for it in the pricing. So with Maybelline they're pretty consistent about using a more standard advertisement approach. You'll still see commercials on television for Maybelline products, whereas Urban Decay has more of a high-end image. You don't really see them advertised on TV, but they do have giant displays inside of Sephora. They do send out PR, which is actually pretty cheap for companies, all things considered. But a lot of high-end brands are the ones that are doing the brand trips, the collaborations with artists and YouTubers, and all of that is a big factor in the cost. In fact, I think the best example of that would be Morphe. Say what you will about Morphe, but it is pretty obvious what they pay their influencers. If you look at the price of a standard palette versus the Jaclyn Hill palette versus the James Charles palette, you can really see, okay, they do pay them a lot of money to have their name on those palettes, and it's reflected in the cost. Research, though, we don't talk about that all that often. In fact, I should be talking about ColourPop for this one, so hold on. So research is a huge component of especially high-end brands. They want to create a quality product so that when you're forking over $50 for a palette, you're happy with it. It goes in the hands of makeup artists, it's applied many times, it's tested, it's taken back to the drawing board, it's reformulated before the final product is released. On the other hand, ColourPop, who is known for their very low prices, has a very, very different take on this, and they're very proud of it too, and it for the most part works. What ColourPop does is they assemble products very quickly and put them out onto the market for the people to test. Now, the benefit of this is that the price can be lower because they weren't paying for the research. The con with this is that we have all purchased a ColourPop dud at some point, but we still come back because we know the prices are low and we know that in general the quality is absolutely there. Now, you also have to factor in the production cost. If you're making a product in China, it's always going to be lower because the workers are paid less. Now, is that fair? No, this is certainly where we get into ethical discussions, but it is a fact, and that's why a lot of companies source their product manufacturer out to China, just cost them less. Whereas if you're making a product in the United States or in a lot of other countries, for example, Australia has a great minimum wage, you know that the people who are making the products are being paid more, but as a consequence, the product price is often more as well. Again, ColourPop being a shocking exception because they skip that whole research step and just throw the products on the market. And then the other component that I've already discussed is mass production. The more you make of something, the less it costs you overall. You can think of baking brownies. If you make one batch of brownies in your oven, how much did it cost you to get the flour, the chocolate, etc.? Versus, are you making for a store, you went to Costco to get the ingredients, you only put in a little bit more time, yes it costs more, but you make more and then you profit more. So those are all giant factors to consider, but I do want to talk a lot about the ingredients because it gets really interesting. One of the main ways that a lot of brands have been advertising their higher end products are their inclusion of natural ingredients. So Tarte's Shape Tape is such a perfect example of this. As you probably know, the well-established dupe for this is the Revolution Conceal and Define. It is worth noting that you don't get as much product, but it's a good dupe overall. However, there's a giant difference in the ingredients. I'll go ahead and put those up with the Tarte on this side and then the Makeup Revolution on the other. Do you see how many more natural ingredients Tarte has included? Now, of course, it costs more to make that. Natural ingredients are typically more expensive. Not always. For those of you who are on some medications, you know that's the case. But generally, including natural ingredients does cost more. But here's that giant gray area. Let's talk about the Physicians Formula Bright Booster Oil Elixir up against the Smashbox Photo Finish Primer Oil. This is $42 for an ounce, and this one is $14.99 for an ounce. And both of these, the ingredients list is completely natural. So there's the Smashbox on the top and Physicians Formula on the bottom. Now you can see this Smashbox has put more attention into the detail of every little component in there, adding in hyaluronic acid, adding in coffee, extra ingredients. But can you really tell a difference in using them? Not necessarily. Is it going to make a difference on your skin over time? Maybe. But I wanted to include that just to point out that these are not hard rules, and there's certainly exceptions. But you got to keep in mind that for every place there's an exception, there's a reason as to why. And in the case of Physicians Formula, it's as simple as their mass marketing. Okay, now let's get into these two because I really find this fascinating. The Blush Nudes, I feel like this wasn't necessarily the best received dupe for the Naked 3, but you can't deny that it's not terrible. And when you look at the swatches side by side, it's actually impressive how close Maybelline got to the Naked 3's color scheme. But if you look at the ingredients, and there's the Naked 3 and there's Maybelline, there's some really interesting details going on here. Mainly the amount of extra binding agents, extra fillers that you see in the Maybelline palette. So just so you know what that color scheme means, the red is emollients, blue is thickeners, orange is preservatives, and purple is the binding agents. You see so many more binding agents, and I think what's fascinating about this is that people are always talking about needing to spray your brush in order to get the best finish with a drugstore eyeshadow. I agree, I do think it helps. And I gotta suspect that a big part of that reason is probably because when you have more bulking agents, when you have more fillers, you need extra grip in order to get all of that pigment that is in there aside from the binders to stick to your eye. Let's talk about some exceptions to the rule, because remember that it's all of those components combined that make the pricing differences. So let's take as an example none other than my new love, the BH Cosmetics Zodiac Love Palette. This actually has a formula that reads pretty darn high-end. It's really rich in emollients, which are going to help you to get an intense color payoff, and sure enough, that's exactly what you see. For a while, before I took the time to look at the ingredients, I felt like I was wondering, how do they do it? But I think there's a lot of factors that go into BH Cosmetics as a brand. One is, you don't see them doing traditional marketing. You know, again, you see Maybelline all over TV on those commercials. You don't see BH Cosmetics. But I think a lot of that is that BH Cosmetics has already had influencer collaborations. They do send out PR. I think they are growing their audience a little more organically and a little more cost effectively. And because of that, they're able to put more in better formulations into their eyeshadow palettes. And even though you can tell that they obviously designed this themselves, you know, they did put effort into the way that it's presented. It's got the mirror in it too. But still, it is just cardboard packaging. It's not the most expensive packaging out there. So of course the product can cost a little less. And it still is $24, worth mentioning, because that's not the same as a $10.99 palette. 1099 has a painful meaning for me right now. Thanks so much for the reminder, Maybelline. So I had to take this investigative approach over to the palette that I've seen so many people say they dislike, and that is the Becca Volcano palette. Now, I like a lot of things that Becca has released. I haven't purchased this, so I really can't attest to its quality, but I do think it's interesting that when I open up the ingredients list on the Ulta website, they've got fillers as their first ingredient for most of the shades in here. And mica's not even listed that high. So to me, this reads like it's probably not gonna perform that well. So that's all I've got for this video. I really hope it answers some questions. I feel like the ultimate answer is, well, it varies a lot. But it does, and maybe, especially for you guys who are involved in the makeup community, I think that you can kind of have a better idea and kind of see, like, oh, this is where this brand's money is going, or this is where this brand's money is going, and how different of an approach they have. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.